I think it's difficult for me to truly say I love anything under the Mount Eerie name. Often the music, as you will know, being aware of their music, it can be very difficult to sit through at times. A Crow Looked at Me being the perfect example of that, which I do think is a good album, but I'd be lying if I said I could sit through that on a regular basis, and I think a lot of people that do love that album would probably agree with that. It's just so isolating and depressive that it's just so difficult to really find any moments where I want to really hear Phil talk about the things that he does. But what I will say though is that I think my favourite release under the Mount Eerie name is probably the Lost Wisdom album that came out in 2008 with Julie Doiron, which I was happy to hear that there was going to be a part two with these two collaborating again, because I do think they really brought out some nice melodies with their music on that one. I think the singing and the harmonies were really lovely to listen to. It was just a really nice indie folk listen. Unfortunately though, my expectations have been a bit slammed, to be honest, because as much as I do like that release, I can't really say that part two uh, has really impacted me in any particular way. I think for one, the lovely harmonies that were once there, I think aren't really there on this one. I think there's a lot of lifeless, monotonous singing between these two, and often they don't really complement each other at all. It's often quite spoken wordy, and I feel like Julie takes a bit of a backseat on most of the songs. She's just kind of murmuring a little bit in the background sometimes. Occasionally they come through with some lovely melodies on a track like Love Without Possession, but it's just not enough. That's one track out of 8. I really don't get a lot out of the music on this one. And Phil Elverum being the, generally fantastic lyricist that he is, I feel is just kind of meandering a little bit on this one, just sort of vague, sort of, I don't know, descriptions of things. It seems like sometimes he's taking the long way round of describing something when it could really just be short and snappy and to the point. And During the Waves, for me, he just doesn't really have much to it, to be honest. Like, he's talking about being on a train, reading about Buddhism, and then it doesn't really link to anything, and it just reminds me way too much of like the Mark Kozlik type stuff, where he just talks about every minor detail and puts it in a song, and sometimes it's like you don't need that bit because it's just not very interesting. Now, to be fair to Phil, I can't be too hard on him because he's never at the level of what Mark is doing these days, where everything just seems to be completely irrelevant and there's no focus or topic to anything. But there just are too many moments on this album that don't really leave me that fulfilled with his lyrics. You got things like here with the speaks the eye, blow breaths, exhale to dissipate the always gathering clouds of all that we foresaw, laid out before us and lived. As I don't know, and then he goes on to talk about like the sky is mirroring emptiness, the whole looking into the fire thing that he has as well on one track, and monsters will arise from it. It's just all a bit. And again, with these lyrics, it's all kind of just like long ways of describing things that ultimately don't really have that much relevance because it's all just very metaphorical, and I just don't really latch on to anything he's saying. And it ultimately doesn't hold a lot of meaning, I don't think. But getting to a track like Widows is where I think things are just way better, because on this track he's talking about how on Mother's Day, people in Minnesota, including himself, will kind of be all like in unison as they are all, thinking about their loved ones passing away, just as he has lost his wife, who was a mother. And you get a sense of more of what he's feeling and what he's going through on this track, because he's just being way more specific and straight to the point, which is what I like more of from any musician generally, any writer. But especially from Phil, because as I've said on this album, he's got a huge tendency to just kind of rail off on different directions, going off on tangents. And then he later on talks about the unwanted attention that he got through the media pointing out, you know, the divorce that him and Michelle Williams, the actress, went through about a year or two, I think, after the death of his wife. And it kind of puts it into perspective of how someone with, you know, a little bit of fame, a little bit of celebrity status, I mean, Phil's not a celebrity, but you know what I mean, someone with a platform, someone with a little bit of popularity, if you will, of how they then have to deal with, you know, all kinds of things they see on the internet through the things that they're going through, when it's very personal and something that you may not want people to even really be talking about at all. And I think as well as that, you get this sense as well that, like, you know, sometimes it's best to just kind of be left alone in these situations. And I feel like he doesn't really go into that much detail with this. He just leaves it there to get you thinking about it, and it's just way more interesting than some of the other songs that I've mentioned here that don't really have that much weight behind them. Or then Belief Part 2, which closes off the album, where you still got that Phil who's filled with so much love, and he's still got that belief, the love, that passion. He's not just gonna let it all go away, even though he's gone through so many awful things. So yeah, these are the rare moments that bring out these compelling lyrical arcs that I find interesting reading into, but so much of the album just offers none of that for me. And when you pair that with the fact that the music isn't particularly very good either, I don't think, with the very simple acoustic guitar playing and the sort of spoken wordy performances from two of the singers here, it's just a lesser version of what we got on the first one 11 years ago. So on a musical level, I can't really say I'm digging this, yeah, it's not much of an enjoyable experience for me. I will go a 5 out of 10 unfortunately, but do let me know your thoughts on this one. I'm interested to see what people think of this album, if you think it's better or worse or as good as the first part that we got in 2008. If you think it's one of Mount Eerie's best altogether, let me know. It would be great to hear what people have to say. A shame that I'm not really feeling it myself, but you know, I'm just one person with a review. Hopefully you understand my perspective. Thank you for watching. Do hope you have a good day. Do subscribe if you enjoyed what you saw here. Thank you. Goodbye.